Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We're reading the Meditations of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antonius, translated by George Long. This is Meditation 9. Meditation 9. Number 1. He who acts unjustly acts impiously. For since the universal nature has made rational animals for the sake of one another to help one another according to their deserts, but in no way to injure one another, he who transgresses her will is clearly guilty of impiety towards the highest divinity, and he too who lies is guilty of impiety to the same divinity. For the universal nature is the nature of things that are, and the things that are have a relation to all things that come into existence. And further, this universal nature is named truth, and is the prime cause of all things that are true. He then who lies intentionally is guilty of impiety, inasmuch as he unjustly acts by deceiving. And he is at variance with the unintentionality, inasmuch as he is at variance with the universal nature, and inasmuch as he disturbs the order by fighting against the nature of the world. For he fights against it, who is moved of himself to that which is contrary to truth. For he had received powers from nature through the neglect of which he is not able now to distinguish falsehood from truth. And indeed, he who pursues pleasure as good and avoids pain as evil is also guilty of impiety. For of necessity, such a man must often find fault with the universal nature, alleging that it assigns things to the bad and the good contrary to the deserts, because frequently the bad are an enjoyment of pleasure and possess the things which procure pleasure. But the good have pain for their share and the things which cause pain. And further, he who is afraid of pain will sometimes also be afraid of some of the things which will happen in the world, and even this is impiety. And he who pursues pleasure will not abstain from injustice, and this is plainly impiety. Now, with respect to the things towards which the universal nature, truth, is equally affected, for it would not have made both unless it was equally affected towards both. Towards these, they who wish to follow nature should be of the same mind with nature and equally affected. With respect to pain, then, and pleasure, or death and life, or honor and dishonor, which the universal nature employs equally, whoever is not equally affected is manifestly acting impiously. And I say that the universal nature, truth, employs them equally, instead of saying that they happen alike to those who are produced in continuous series and to those who come after them by virtue of a certain original movement of providence, according to which it moved from a certain beginning to this ordering of things, having conceived certain principles of the things which were to be, and having determined powers productive of beings and of changes and of such like successions. This first one of number 9 is really a doozy, isn't it? Huh? He's talking about the truth. Jimmy put down here guilty. Sorry, that's wrong. Sorry, excuse me. Truth. Guilty here. Guilty might not be the word for this whole first meditation, but it's really guilty of impiety. So he's talking about a lot of guilt here. If You act according, right? Not according to your nature, the truth. If you stray from the truth, and here he talks about pleasure and pain, right? You shouldn't avoid pain and you shouldn't pursue pleasure. He who acts unjustly acts impiously. So it's about piety, isn't it? About providence. Here's providence. Remember, he vacillates, right? He uses Zeus in some places. He uses the gods in some places. Okay? Interesting, isn't it? Number 2, it would be a man's happiest lot to depart from mankind without having had any taste of lying, hypocrisy, and luxury and pride. That's an interesting thought. You would die happy by not ever tasting lying, hypocrisy, luxury, and pride. However, to breathe out one's life when a man has had enough of these things is the next best voyage, as the saying is. Hast thou determined to abide with vice, and has not experience yet induced thee to fly from this pestilence? For the destruction of the understanding is a pestilence, much more indeed than any such corruption and change of this atmosphere would surround us. For this corruption is a pestilence of animals so far as they are animals, but the other is a pestilence of men so far as they are men. What's this pestilence he's talking about? Haven't you determined, hast thou? He's talking to himself. Remember, these are meditations to himself. So in number 2, he's saying, haven't you determined that to live with vice, and has not experience yet induced thee to fly from vice? This pestilence is vice. Vice destroys understanding. Remember, this is very important. Vice destroys understanding, much more indeed than any such corruption and change in the atmosphere. Worse than changes in the atmosphere. Vice. What is vice? Jimmy put a note here, vice. You know what vice is. It's bad stuff, right? Number 3, do not despise death, but be well content with death, since this too is one of those things which nature wills. For such as it is to be young and grow old, and to increase and to reach maturity, and to have teeth, a beard, gray hairs, and to beget, and to be pregnant, and to bring forth, and all the other natural operations which the seasons of thy life bring, such also is disillusion. This, then, is consistent with the character of a reflecting man. Note the hyphen. To be neither careless, nor impatient, nor contemptuous with respect to death, but to wait for death as one of the operations of nature. Don't despise death. Just wait for it. It's going to happen. As soon as thou now waitest for the time when the child shall come out of thy wife's womb, maybe his wife was pregnant, so be ready for the time when thy soul shall fall out of this envelope. Puts a little footnote here. But if thou requirest thy heart, also a vulgar kind of comfort, you require a vulgar kind of comfort, which shall reach thy heart, thou wilt be made best reconciled to death by observing the objects from which thou art going to be removed, and the morals of those whom thy soul will no longer be mingled. So in other words, if you need some comfort, just look around you at the things you're going to be leaving. For it is in no way right to be offended with men, but it is thy duty to care for them. This number 75 here, the nature of all moved to make the universe, but now neither everything that takes place or the consequence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You'll remember that this long footnote passage from the previous meditation. That's this one here, number 75. That's what he refers to here, number 775. But in no way be offended, but it is thy duty to care for men and to bear with them gently. And yet, to remember that thy departure, your death, will not be from men who have the same principles as thyself. For this is the only thing, if there be any, which could draw us from the contrary way and attach us to life. Hyphen, to be permitted to live with those who have the same principles as ourselves. But now you see how great is the trouble arising from the discordance of those who live together, so that thou mayest say, come quick, O death, lest perchance I too should forget myself. I put a question mark here because this is going to require you to read several times to understand what he's talking about. Yeah. For example, he's talking this whole thing here, if I go back, it's about death, that you shouldn't despise it. It's what nature wills. Look around you on what you'll be leaving. Your departure will not be from men who have the same principles as you. You're not leaving people like you. They're all not like you. Correct? For this is the only thing, if there's any, which could draw us from the contrary way and attach us to life. If we were going to leave people like ourselves, that would be the only thing that would keep us from, oh my God, I'm going to die, right? But that's not true because not everybody's like us. Okay? Got it? Read carefully. Number 4, he who does wrong against himself, and he who acts unjustly to himself, because he makes himself bad. This is, Jimmy put an arrow here. When you see these arrows, Jimmy's telling you these are very important. I want you to think of it. This is titled wrong. This is what does it mean to do wrong? He who does wrong against himself. Well, Jimmy, what do you mean? If I murder someone, aren't I murdering the person? Isn't that wrong? Yeah, but Marcus is saying when you do that wrong, when you commit the wrong, when you lie, when you cheat, when you steal, whenever you do wrong against yourself. And if you act unjustly against yourself, because whatever you've done that's unjust, it makes you bad. This is a very difficult concept. We're going to talk about this in the analysis of the second set of meditations. And I'm going to remind you of Father Zosima from Fyodor Dostoevsky, who says, everything is wrong, and all we really should do is kiss the earth and beg forgiveness. That when we do things, whenever we harm someone, we are harming ourselves. We're responsible for everybody else. Difficult concept. Number 5. He often acts unjustly who does not do a certain thing. Not only he who does a certain thing. This is injustice. He often acts unjustly who does not do a certain thing. Not only he who does a certain thing. That's a little weird, isn't it? Number 6, that we'll have to digest that sometime. Let's do it now, Jimmy. A person often acts unjustly who does not do a certain thing. So if you don't do a certain thing, you act unjustly. What would that certain thing be that you don't do and suddenly you act unjustly? You don't speak up when someone's wrong and you know it's wrong and you see the wrong and you don't defend the person. That's an example, right? Sometimes when the translator translates the Greek, when you got a negative here and unjustly, so if you were to rewrite this in a positive way, you act justly when you do certain things. Well, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? If you do certain things, you act justly. Not only he who does a certain thing. Now it's starting to make sense, you see? I think. Number 6. Thy present opinion founded on understanding, and thy present conduct directed to social good, and thy present disposition of contentment with everything which happens, that's enough. Wow. So your present opinion on understanding, your present conduct toward social good, and your present disposition on contentment with everything that's happening, that's good. That's enough. Remember, he's talking to himself, right? He's giving himself comfort. William Blake, a famous English poet, right? You never know what's enough until you know what's more than enough. What is enough? You never know what's enough until you know what's more than enough. One of Jimmy's favorite sayings. Number 7. Wipe out imagination. Check desire, extinguish appetite, and keep the ruling faculty in its own power. Some rules to live by. Quit. Don't let your imagination get away from you. You know, something happens and you start right away imagining, oh my God. Check your desire. Forget desire. Well, that would be boring, wouldn't it, Jimmy? I don't know, would it? Extinguish appetite and keep the ruling faculty, your reason, in its own power. Don't forget, he's a Stoic, right? Number 8. Among the animals which have not reason, one life is distributed. But among reasonable animals, one intelligent soul is distributed. Just as there is one earth of all things which are of an earthly nature, and we see by one light, and we breathe one air, all of us that have the faculty of vision, and all that have life. An animal is an animal, but a reasonable animal has intelligent soul. Number 9. All things which participate in anything which is common to them, they all move towards that which is the same kind with themselves. Everything which is earthy turns towards the earth. Everything which is liquid flows together. And everything which is of an aerial kind does the same. And so that they require something to keep them asunder in the application of force. Pardon me. Fire, indeed, moves upward on account of the elemental fire. But it is so ready to be kindled together with all the fire which is here, that even every substance which is somewhat dry and is easily ignited, because there is less mingled with it of that which is a hindrance to ignition. And accordingly, then, everything also which participates in the common intelligent nature moves in a like manner towards that which is the same kind with itself. It's talking about movement here. Everything goes with itself. They stay with itself, right? Birds of a feather flock together. For so much as it is superior in comparison with all other things, in the same degree also is it more ready to mingle with and to be fused with that which is akin to it. Accordingly, among animals devoid of reason, we find swarms of bees and herds of cattle and the nurture of young birds and, in a manner, loves. And even in animals there are souls. For that power which brings them together is seen to exert itself in the superior degree, and in such a way as never has been observed in plants, nor in stones, nor in trees. But in rational animals, there are political communities and friendships and families and meetings of people, and in wars, treaties and armistices. But in the things which are still superior, even though they are separated from one another, unity in a manner exists, as in the stars. Thus, the ascent to a higher degree is able to produce a sympathy even in things which are separated. That's what they call the 30,000-foot level, right? The higher you go, the more you look, the more you see, the more you see, better you know where to look. Remember what I was telling you? See then what now takes place. For only intelligent animals have now forgotten this mutual desire and inclination, and in them alone the property of flowing together isn't seen. But still, though men strive to avoid, they are caught and held by it, for their nature is too strong for them. And you will see what I say if thou only observest, as long as you observe. Sooner then will one find anything earthy which comes in contact with no earthly thing than a man altogether separated from other men. Sooner then will you find anything earthy which comes in contact with no earthly thing other than a man altogether separated from other men. We're all one. Number 10. Both man and God and the universe produce fruit. At the proper seasons, each produces it. But, and if usage has especially fixed these terms to the vine and like things, there's nothing. Reason produces fruit, both for all and for itself. And there are produced from it, from reason, other things of the same kind as reason itself. That's a complex thought, isn't it? Number 11. If thou art able, correct by teaching those who do wrong. But if you can't do that, remember, indulgence is given to you for a purpose. And the gods too are indulgent to such people, such persons. And for some purposes, they even help them to get healthy, wealth, reputation. So kind they are. And it is in thy power also. Or say, who hinders you? Who hinders thee? So if you're able to correct people by teaching them who do wrong, do it. But if you can't, indulging is given to you for a purpose. And the gods too are indulgent to such people. Just put up with them. Put up with them. Number 12. Labor not as one who is wretched, nor yet as one who would be pitied or admired, but direct thy will to one thing only, to put yourself in motion and to check thyself as the social reason requires. Labor. Put yourself in motion and check yourself as the social reason requires. What does that mean? What's the social reason? Well, don't do things you shouldn't be doing. Help people. Number 13. Today I have got out of all trouble, or rather, I have cast out all trouble, for it was not outside, but it was within and in my opinions. Very, very important observation that he wrote here. He's saying he got out of he didn't get into any trouble, but then he cast out trouble. For trouble wasn't outside of him in the things and the events, but within and in his own opinions. This opinion thing is very important. It peppers this whole meditation thing. Opinions are dangerous because that's speculation. Remember, he wants you to deal with things as they are, not as you wish them to be. Number 14, all things are the same, familiar in experience and ephemeral in time, and they're worthless in the matter. Everything now is just as it was in the time of those whom we've buried. I titled this Change because he's basically saying everything's the same. Nothing new under the sun. We've talked about this. Number 15. Things stand outside of us, themselves, by themselves, neither knowing aught of themselves nor expressing any judgment. So what is it then which does judge about them? The ruling faculty. So he's saying things are outside of us, neither knowing aught of themselves. They don't know about themselves. They don't express judgment. So what is it that does judge about them? Well, it's us, the ruling faculty, reason. We're the ones who make these determinations. Number 16, not in passivity, but in activity lie the evil and the good of the rational social animal. Just as his virtue and his vice lie not in passivity, but in activity. And here he quotes some Latin from Cicero. Action speaks louder than words. Don't be passive. Active is where evil and good of the rational social animal. Actions. 17. For the stone which has been thrown up, it's no evil to come down, nor indeed any good to have been carried up. And he refers to Meditation 8, number 20. And Jimmy put, well, that's life. You throw a stone up, it doesn't mean it's evil if it comes down, nor indeed any good to have carried up. It's just is. You see? This number 820 is here. I brought it up here so you don't have to go back and reread it. Nature has regard in everything no less to the end than to the beginning and the continuance, just like the man who throws up a ball. What good is it then for the ball to be thrown up, or harm for it to come down, or even to have fallen? And what good is it for the bubble while it holds together, and what harm is it when it bursts? The same can be said of light. Remember, he's making observations, speculations about the human condition. Number 18. Penetrate inward into men's leading principles, and thou will see what judges thou art afraid of, and what kind of judges that they are of themselves. So Jimmy said, observe things. Number 19. All things are changing, and you yourself are in continuous mutation, and in a manner in continuous destruction, and the whole universe too. Remember, change, all things are flowing, said the sage Heraclitus. Number 20. It's your duty to leave another man's wrongful act there where it is. I titled that Forgiveness. It is your duty to leave another man's wrongful act where it is. Leave it alone. 21. Termination of activity, cessation from movement and opinion, and in a sense their death, it's no evil. Turn your thoughts now to the consideration of your life. Thy life as a child, as a youth, thy manhood, thy old age, and for in these also every change was a death. You see what he's saying here? The changes in the stages of life. Is this anything to fear? Turn thy thoughts now to thy life under thy grandfather, and then to thy life under thy mother, and then to thy life under thy father. And as thou findest many other differences and changes and terminations, ask yourself, is this anything to fear? In a like manner, then, neither are the termination and cessation and change of your whole life a thing to be afraid of. Isn't that a beautiful thought? What the hell are we afraid of, right? It's just part of life. 22. Hasten thy own ruling faculty. Notice I skip over the brackets. That's George Long telling us things. Hasten thy own ruling faculty, and that of the universe, and that of thy neighbor, thy own, that thou mayst make it just. And that of the universe, that thou mayest remember of what thou art a part. And that of thy neighbor, that thou mayst know whether he acted ignorantly or with knowledge, and that thou mayst also consider his ruling faculty is akin to thine. Make your reason, right, that of the universe and that of your neighbor. Your own, make it just. The universe, remember you're part of the universe. And if your neighbor, judge him, make sure he acted ignorantly or with knowledge, so that you may consider his ruling faculty is akin to thine. Is he like you? Does he think like you? Does he share the same values? Jimmy titled this Point of View. Number 23. As thou thyself art a component part of a social system, so let every act of thine be a component part of social life. Whatever act of thine, then, has no reference, either immediately or remotely, to a social end, this tears asunder your life and does not allow it to be one. And it is of nature, it's kind of a mutiny. Just as when in a popular assembly, a man acting by himself stands apart from the general agreement. Social loyalty. 24. Quarrels of little children in their sports and poor spirits, caring about dead bodies. And so what is exhibited in the representation of the mansions of the dead strikes our eyes more clearly. Reality. 25. Examine into the quality of the form of an object, and then detach it altogether from its material part, and then contemplate it. And then determine the time and the longest which a thing of this particular form is naturally made to endure. Examine things for what they are. Take them apart. Think about them. And think about the longest which the thing in this form will endure. Number 26. Thou hast endured infinite troubles through not being contented with thy ruling faculty when it does the things which it is constituted by nature to do. But enough! So you've endured infinite troubles through not being contented. So you've by not being content with your reason when it does the things which it's constituted to do. But enough. It's kind of like chiding himself, right? Number 27. When another man blames thee or hates thee, or when men say about thee anything injurious, approach their poor souls, penetrate within, and see what kind of men they are. Thou wilt discover that there is no reason to take any trouble that these men may have this or that opinion about you. However, thou must be well disposed toward them, for by nature they are friends. And the gods, too, aid them in all their ways by dreams and signs toward the attainment of those things on which they set value. So think. Number 28. The periodic movements of the universe are the same, up and down, age to age. And either the universal intelligence puts itself in motion for every separate effect, and if this is so, be thou content that which is the result of its activity, or it puts itself in motion once, and then everything comes by way of sequence in a manner. Or indivisible elements are the origin of all things, hyphen. And in a word, if there is a God, all is well. And if chance rules, do not thou also be governed by it. Soon will the earth cover us all, and then the earth too will change, and the things also which result from change will continue to change forever, and these again forever. For if man reflects on the changes and transformations which follow one another, like wave after wave, and their rapidity, he's going to despise everything which is perishable. Order or chaos? Jimmy titled this meditation. Is this an orderly universe or a chaotic universe? 29. The universal cause is like a winter torrent. It carries everything along with it. But how worthless are all these poor people who are engaged in matters political and, as they suppose, playing the philosopher? They're all drivellers. Well then, man, do what nature now requires. Shut up, Marcus. Set thyself in motion, if it is in thy power, and do not look about thee to see if anyone will observe it, nor yet expect Plato's Republic, but be content if the smallest thing goes on well, and consider such an event to be no small matter. For who can change men's opinions? And without a change of opinions, what else is there than the slavery of men who groan while they pretend to obey? Come on, tell me of Alexander, Philippus, Demetrius, Valerian. They themselves shall judge whether they discovered what the common nature required and trained themselves accordingly. But if they acted like tragedy heroes, no one has condemned me to imitate them. Simple and modest is the work of philosophy. Draw me not aside to insolence and pride. Jimmy titled this meditation Motivation. Look down from above on the number 30. Look down from above on the countless herds of men and the countless solemnities and the infinitely varied voyagings in storms and calms and the indifferences which those are born who live together and die. And consider, too, the life lived by others in olden time and the life of those who will live after thee, and the life now lived among barbarous nations, and how many know not even thy name, and how many will soon forget it, and how they will, who perhaps now are praising thee, will soon blame thee, and that neither a posthumous name is of any value, nor reputation, nor anything else. In other words, nothing matters. It's pretty depressing, huh? Number 31. Let there be freedom from perturbations with respect to the things which come from the external cause. And let there be justice in the things done by virtue of the internal cause. That is, let there be movement and action terminating in this, in social acts, for this is according to thy nature. Remember, we're here to help people, right? Number 32. You can't remove out of the way many useless things among those which disturb thee. for they lie entirely in thy opinion. And thou wilt then gain for thyself ample space for comprehending the whole universe in thy mind. And by contemplating the eternity of time and observing the rapid change of every several thing, how short is the time from birth to dissolution, and the illimitable time before birth, as well as the equally boundless time after dissolution. Focus, point of view, life before and after death. This is an amazing thought provoker, isn't he? Number 33. All that thou seest will quickly perish, and those who have been spectators of its dissolution will soon perish too. And he who dies at the extreme old age will be brought into the same condition with him who died prematurely. Change. All things are a-flowing. Number 34. What are these men's leading principles, and about what kind of things are they busy? And for what kind of reasons do they love and honor? Imagine that thou seest their souls, their poor souls laid bare. What? When they think that they would do harm by their blame or good by their praise. When they think that they do harm by their blame or good by their praise. What an idea! So imagine that. Imagine that. 35. Loss is nothing else than change. But the universal nature delights in change, and in obedience to her all things are now done well, and from eternity have been done in like form, and will be such to the end without end, time without end. So what then dost thou say? That all things have been, and that all things always will be bad, and that no power has ever been found, and so to make gods to rectify these things. But the world has been condemned to be bound in a never-ceasing evil. Stop complaining. 36. The rottenness of matter, which is the foundation of everything. Water, dust, bones, filth, marble rocks, calcites of the earth, gold, silver, sediments, garments, bits of hair, herbal dye, blood, and everything else is of the same kind. And that which is the nature of breath is also another thing of the same kind, changing from this to that. I call this rot. Everything rots. Who's Marcus talking to? Well, he's talking to himself. He's meditating. You should keep a journal, ladies and gentlemen. Number 37. Enough of this wretched life and murmuring and apish tricks. What art thou disturbed? Why art thou disturbed? What is there new in this? What unsettles thee? Is it the form of the thing? Well, look at it. Or is it the matter? Well, look at it. But besides these, there's nothing. Toward the gods, then. Now become at last more simple and better. It is the same whether we examine these things for 100 years or 3. There's my arrow. This is self-criticism. Who's he talking to? To himself. Do you talk to yourself? Say, come on, shape up, Jimmy. Do you talk to yourself? You should talk to yourself in your head, right? If you start talking to yourself out loud, people lock you up maybe. 38. If any man has done wrong, the harm is his own. We just read that, remember? And you're going to say, well, Jimmy, some of these meditations are, in fact, redundant. Yes, they are. Why? Well, because they're an ongoing journal while he's fighting barbarians. If any man has done wrong, the harm is his own, but perhaps he has not done wrong. Aha! Aha! What is wrong? What is wrong? 39. Either all things proceed from one intelligent source and come together as in one body, and the part ought not to find fault with what is done for the benefit of the whole, or there are only atoms and nothing else than mixture and dispersion. See, he's philosophizing on what is the world comprised of. Either things come from one source, come together in one body, or there's only atoms and nothing else, and they mix up and disperse. So why then art thou disturbed? Remember who he's talking to. Say to the ruling faculty, art thou dead? Art thou corrupted? Art thou playing the hypocrite? Art thou become a beast? Dost thou herd and feed with the rest? George Long put a footnote here. There's some corruption at the end of this section, which means corruption meaning that they can't get the translation from the original Greek, perhaps. But I think that the translation expresses the emperor's meaning, whether intelligence rules all things or chance, and that a man must not be disturbed. He must see the power that he has and be tranquil. So Jimmy titled this section either or. Either it does this or it does this, which agrees with George. And then he starts asking himself questions. Why are you disturbed? Say to your ruling faculty, say to your reason, are you dead? Are you corrupted? Blah, blah, blah. Interesting, isn't it? 40. Either the gods have no power or they have power. There's the question, right? And if then they have no power, why do you pray to them? But if they have power, why don't you pray? Why dost thou not pray for them to give thee the faculty of not fearing any of the things which you fear, or of not desiring any of the things which you desire, or not being pained at anything, rather than pray that any of these things should not happen or happen. For certainly if they can cooperate with men, they, meaning the gods, right? They can cooperate for these purposes. But perhaps you'll say that the gods have placed them in your power. Well then, isn't it better to use what is in your power like a free man than to desire in a slavish and abject way what is not in your power? And who has told thee that the gods do not aid us even in the things which are in our power? Begin then to pray for such things, and you'll see. One man prays thus, how shall I be able to lie with that woman? Do you pray thus? How shall I not desire to lie with that woman? Another prays thus, how shall I be released from this? And another prays, how shall I not desire to be released? You see what he's doing here? He's juxtapositioning, right? How should I desire? How should I not desire? Another thus, how shall I desire? Another thus, how shall I not lose my little son? Another prays, how shall I not desire to be released? Thou thus, how shall I not be afraid to lose my little son? In fine, turn thy prayers this way and see what comes. What's he doing? Why not pray? See what the heck happens. Pretty smart. Or, as a certain person once said, a few years ago, what do you got to lose? What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Epicurus, philosopher, says, in my sickness, my conversation was not about my bodily sufferings, nor, says he, did I talk about such subjects to those who visited me. But I continue to discourse on the nature of things as before, keeping to this main point, how the mind, while participating in such movements as go in the poor flesh, shall be free, right, from perturbations and maintain its proper good. Nor did I, he says, give the physicians an opportunity of putting on solemn looks as if they were doing something great. But my life went on well and happily. In other words, Epicurus was saying when he got sick, he didn't talk about his sickness. He just acted whatever, normal. He didn't bring up the sickness. Do then the same that he did. Who's he talking to here? Himself. Do the same as he, Epicurus, did, both in sickness, if thou art sick, and in any other circumstances, for never to desert philosophy in any events that may befall us, nor to hold trifling talk, either with an ignorant man or with one unacquainted with nature, is a principle of all schools of philosophy. But to be intent only on that which makes thou art now doing, and an instrument by which thou doest. Don't make it about you. It's about what you're doing. Talk about what you're doing. Isn't that interesting? From a me generation. Oh, it's all about me, right? No, don't make it about you. Be intent on that which you're doing now and on the instrument by which you do it. It's not about you. It's about them, what you're doing. Number 42. When thou art offended with any man's shameless conduct, immediately ask yourself, is it possible then that shameless men should not be in the world? So when you see shameless conduct, ask yourself, is it possible that there can be no shameless men? It's not possible, says Marcus. So do not then require what is impossible. You see you see a schmuck, right? Ask yourself, should schmucks be in the world? Is it possible that the world has no schmucks? Well, it's not possible that the world has no schmucks, so don't require what's impossible. There's going to be schmucks. For this man also is one of those shameless men who must of necessity be in the world. So let the same consideration be present to thy mind, and in the case of the knave and the faithless man, and of every man who does wrong in any way. For at the same time that thou dost remind thyself that it is impossible that any such kind of men should not exist, the impossible and not make it hard, right? They're going to be here. Thou wilt become more kindly disposed toward everyone individually. Remember, he wants to treat everybody, help everybody. So it's useful to perceive this too immediately when the occasion arises, what virtue nature has given to man to oppose to every wrongful act. For nature has given to man as an antidote against the stupid man, mildness, and against another kind of man, some other power. So he's basically saying nature has given us a way to deal with wrongdoers, wrongful acts, bad people, mildness. This is a very Christian thought, isn't it? And in all cases, it is possible for thee to correct by teaching the man who has gone astray. You can help the person. For every man who errs misses the object and has gone astray. Besides, wherein hast thou been injured? How have you been injured? For thou wilt find that no one among those against whom thou art irritated has done wrong anything by which thy mind could be made worse. But that which is evil to thee and harmful has its foundation only in the mind. Well, what about the guy who stabs me with his knife? We're not talking about that, right? And what harm, we're talking about sticks and stones will hurt my bones, but names will never hurt. And what harm is done? Or what is there strange if a man who has not been instructed does the acts of an uninstructed man? If you've never been taught how to behave and you misbehave, what's the problem, right? Consider whether thou should not rather blame thyself, because thou did not expect such a man to err in such a way. This is one of the most important thoughts you'll ever come across. So when you come across a man who's doing bad things, consider whether thou should not blame yourself because you didn't expect such a man to err in such a way. You should have expected him to do that. So what's the problem? You see? You see how this guy thinks? It's kind of amazing. For thou hast means given thee by thy reason to suppose that it was likely that he would commit this error. And yet thou hast forgotten, and you're amazed that he's made the mistake. Why are you surprised? But most of all, when thou blames the man as faithless or ungrateful, turn to thyself. For the fault is manifestly your own. Whether thou distrust that a man who has such a disposition would keep his promise, or when conferring your kindness that thou dost not confer it absolutely, nor yet in such a way as to be received from the very act all the profit. Very confusing, but think about it. For what more dost thou want when thou hast done a man a service? What are you helping him for money? Art thou not content that thou hast done something conformable to thy nature? And dost thou seek to be paid for it? Just as if the eye demanded a recompense for seeing, or your feet for walking. Do you pay your feet to walk and your eyes to see? For as these members are formed for a particular purpose, and by working according to their several constitutions obtain what they are, so also as man is formed by nature to acts of benevolence. And when he has done anything benevolent or in any other way conducive to the common interest, he's acted conformably to his constitution, and he gets what is his own. For the fault is manifestly, but most of all, when thou blames a man as faithless or ingrate, you faithless, you ingrate, turn to thyself. For the fault is manifestly thy own. Whether you trusted that man who had a disposition that would keep his promise, or when you're conferring your kindness, you didn't confer it absolutely. You didn't give it entirely, yet in such a way as to have received from the very act all the profit. You didn't give, in other words, you give everything you have to the person, and that in itself is the profit. So what did you want when you did that, when you helped the man, when you did a man a service? Were you not content that you've done something conformable to thy nature? Or does thou seek to be paid for it? Do you pay your eyes to see? Do you pay your feet to walk? So be kind to everybody. And here he says, he's talking about some of the Greek language. For know, dear ones, that every one of us, this is Father Zosima in the Brothers Karamazov. I want to leave you with this thought as we end up meditation number 9. For know, dear ones, that every one of us is undoubtedly responsible for all men and everything on earth, not merely through the general sinfulness of creation, but each one personally for all mankind and every individual man. This is Dostoevsky writing in the Brothers Karamazov. Father Zosima says this. He's one of the Russian monks that appears as one of the characters in that wonderful novel. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, is what Marcus Aurelius is saying, that you're basically responsible not just for yourself, but for everyone. It's our duty to help people. It's our duty. Well, Jimmy, why is he killing barbarians if he's there to help them? Why doesn't he teach them there? Because they're threatening the state. And remember, the state trumps Stoicism. He's defending the Roman Empire. Right? You've been reading with Jimmy. This is Jimmy. We've been reading meditation number 9 from Marcus Aurelius Antonius, translated by George Long. Be sure to visit and read other classics on my website. We love reading, don't you? Don't you love reading? Oh, these are so important. Go back and reread this. Pause. Think about it. How is it going to affect your life? Do you believe this guy? He's thought some of these things through. They're very profound. And remember, if you have questions, email me, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. I was talking to a young man the other day. I'll leave you with this thought. And it turns out that he's a follower of Jesus. And I asked him, he's asked me, I said, well, I practice Catholicism, although I don't practice it now. But I was trained in it. I grew up in it. And he says, why do you pray to Mary, the Mother of God? And I said, well, she bore God. But she's not Jesus. He was Jesus. He was focused on Jesus. So I asked him a simple question. I said, do you see or do you not see, because you haven't studied other religions, other belief systems, like Marcus Aurelius? This is a belief system. And we've already seen in his meditation, sometimes it's plural gods, sometimes it's a singular God, sometimes it's providence, right? It's many things. It's not one thing. So I asked this young man, have you seen the thread of God in all the religions? What do you mean? Well, have you, in the study of religion, of belief systems, let's say, there's a thread that runs through these things. One of those threads is to help other people, to be benevolent, to be good. That's one of the threads that you'll find in almost any religious belief you pick up, Hinduism, Buddhism. There's a certain respect and a helpfulness that's required of people to other people, because we're in society together. That's a thread. And that's what Marcus Aurelius is dealing with in these meditations. It's not only that thread, but really, how do you deal with evil? Marcus clearly believes that the person is just making a huge mistake when he chooses wrong. And then it's up to us to correct that wrong. The big thing you'll have to decide when we analyze this for the final time after we're done with these meditations is what is wrong. What does wrong mean? And what does right mean? We may have touched on that in the analysis after the first 6. I forgot. Thanks. Thanks for reading with Jimmy. You take care of yourselves. Remember, be kind.